Prime Minister Modi is a great gentleman, a great man. But he was much smarter than the people that he was against in terms of the United States. He was ripping us off in India. So we made a deal with India, and it's a fair deal now. And we are not paying tariffs to them, and they are paying tariffs. We did a little flip.
In July 2025, Prime Minister Narendra Modi was photographed alongside Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit.
Leaders of China, Russia, and India are putting their friendly relationship on full display. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Russian President Vladimir Putin could all be seen holding hands and smiling in front of the cameras there.
Predictably, the images generated a wave of speculation. Had India begun drifting away from the United States? Was New Delhi signaling its displeasure with Washington? Had the pressure created by President Donald Trump's tariffs finally pushed India into a different geopolitical camp? The timing certainly invited such interpretations. Only a few months earlier, the Trump administration had imposed tariffs on Indian exports while publicly discussing penalties linked to India's continued purchase of Russian oil.
These elite countries, they're elite because we let them make so much money. And I want them to do well, but I don't want them to do well on the backs of the American taxpayers.
Trade negotiations had become increasingly difficult, and many observers actually assumed that India would eventually be forced into a choice. Countries facing pressure from Washington usually do one of two things. They either accommodate American demands or they openly push back against them. There's no middle path. What India actually did was far more interesting. While one set of Indian negotiators continued discussions with their American counterparts, another was accelerating talks with Europe. Around the same time, New Delhi was moving towards a major trade agreement with the United Kingdom while simultaneously exploring opportunities elsewhere. None of these developments were announced as a part of some grand geopolitical strategy. Yet taken together, they revealed a characteristic feature of Indian diplomacy. When pressure increases in one direction, India's instinct is rarely to seek confrontation. Instead, it expands its room for maneuver. The instinct has become increasingly visible over the past few years. Consider India's response to the war in Ukraine. From the moment Russian troops crossed the border, governments across Europe and North America expected countries around the world to clarify where they stood. The conflict quickly acquired a moral dimension in the Western political theatre, and many assumed that the strategic partners of the United States would eventually align themselves with the broader Western position. Now came India's turn, and India once again chose a different path. It continued engaging with Washington, expanded cooperation in the Indo-Pacific, deepened technology partnerships with the United States, and participated in an increasing number of military exercises. But at the same time, it significantly increased purchases of Russian oil and maintained political engagement with Moscow. To many observers, this appeared contradictory. Yet from New Delhi's perspective, the contradiction existed only if one assumed that every international relationship had to be viewed through the lens of bloc politics. We were clearly not subscribing to it, and that assumption has never sat comfortably with Indian strategic thinking. One of the recurring mistakes foreign observers make when analyzing India is the tendency to ask whether a country is pro-America or pro-Russia or increasingly anti-China. Indian policymakers generally approach the question very differently. Their objective is not to position India inside someone else's camp. Their objective is to prevent India from becoming excessively dependent on any camp at all. This becomes particularly obvious during moments of crisis. When Donald Trump publicly suggested that Washington had played a decisive role in easing tensions between India and Pakistan in the aftermath of Operation Sindoor, many expected an angry response from New Delhi. The issue touched one of the most sensitive areas in Indian diplomacy. For decades, successive Indian governments have rejected third-party mediation on Kashmir and have insisted that the disputes with Pakistan remain bilateral matters. Yet the Indian response was strikingly restrained. There was no diplomatic confrontation, no diplomatic spectacle, and no attempt to turn the disagreement into a public feud. The Ministry of External Affairs simply reiterated India's established position. India and Pakistan had communicated directly. Kashmir remains a bilateral issue, and the government's position had not changed at all. It was a simple clarification. What stands out is not merely the content of the response, but the style of it. And this happens over and over again, where the same patterns appears repeatedly, whether one looks at the aftermath of the surgical strikes, the Balakot operation, the Galwan crisis, or Operation Sindoor. The language is always most measured. Officials explain what has happened, outline India's position, and avoid saying much more than what is necessary. In an age where governments increasingly communicate through outrage and spectacle, India often behaves as though restraint itself serves a strategic purpose. If you look at this individually, these episodes may seem unrelated. Trump tariffs, Russian oil, Ukraine war, Kashmir, trade negotiations with Europe, and military operations against Pakistan appear to belong to entirely different stories. Yet they all point towards the same underlying principle, that Indian diplomacy is built around the assumption that uncertainty is permanent. Alliances may shift, leaders may change, economic pressures may emerge unexpectedly, and today's partner may not always remain tomorrow's partner. The result is a diplomatic culture that places enormous value on flexibility. That flexibility is frequently mistaken for indecision, particularly by observers accustomed to seeing international politics as a contest between clearly defined camps. But as the international system becomes more fragmented and transactional, India's behavior actually begins to look less like indecision and more like preparation for the future. The world is becoming harder to predict, and India is responding in the manner it usually does when confronted with uncertainty, by ensuring that it retains as many options as possible, and that we look very mature, and that our responses are extremely grounded.